Alright, g'day everyone, Borny from PDI. Went and grabbed the GoPro because I've only got a handful of magazines left. What I've been doing today is adjusting 30 ISA magazines, which are Ideal Small Arms magazines, made in Australia. Polymer mags that fit the, so they fit the Norinco JW15, JW25, the Bruno Mod 1 and Mod 2, as well as the CZ452, 453, 455, as well as the 512. So what I've been doing is each one pulling out of its packet, and I've been testing it to make sure it's going to feed reliably in a CZ452 Scout, because there is, I think, a dozen or so of these 452 ZKM Scouts that belong to SSAA, and they're going to be using them at the Scout Jamboree, the National Jamboree, which is next week, and we're supplying 30 mags, and I'd really prefer if everyone doesn't have little feeding issues on the day, so I'm just adjusting them all to make sure they're all going to work reliably with a 452 Scout that I have. Generally I found that the particular models all like them adjusted to work similar sort of way. I've had brand new magazines with my 455 that I've never had to adjust. I've also had, a batch of mags, which every single one I had to adjust the follower slightly. Look, they're in spring steel bent part. Sometimes there'll be a slightly different tolerance. Bottom metal tolerance is going to be one thing. The depth of the action is going to be another tolerance. The way the bolt actually lines up with the action and the magazine is another tolerance. The follower angles, the two tabs, tolerances there, and as well as the length of the spring, that's another little tolerance. The actual shape, the injection molded parts, pretty reliable, but you've got all these little things that can sometimes mean that what happens is the last round, when the spring's at its weakest, or spring's at full extension, the last round, just like I just had a moment ago, I'm about to adjust this magazine, the front of the mag popped up, the front of the round pops up. As it goes forward, it pops up. I don't know if I'm going to be able to demonstrate this without it being in the action. No, it's going to pretend to work correctly. So the back of the follower drops down, the front pops up, and that hits the top of the chamber, and you get a jam. Sometimes you actually bend the whole 22 round. So what I do, I'll just sort of demonstrate that in the gun. So my method is to always put 2 rounds in the magazine. First one to make sure there's no issues when the magazine is loaded and you've got multiple rounds, but that one is almost always pretty good. Oh, I must have already adjusted this one. So I fire 2 shots, and then I just put a single round in the mag just to test. I wasn't sure if I'd adjusted this one or not. I went and grabbed the GoPro. Yeah, so that one feeds nicely now. I'll demonstrate how to get to that stage. So, brand new, out of the packet. This is all Ely Club ammo, and I have officially just run out. I had a whole box. So, 2 rounds, brand new magazine. It's a bit windy, so sorry about that, my quality of the video. Yep, that looks like it's going to feed well. And jam. Cool. So take that round back out, little screwdriver or Allen key, depress the little indent at the back of the magazine. So there's a little hole there, press that indent. What that's doing, I'll just demonstrate a bit clearly, is there's this little tab here, little spring, so that actually holds the magazine in place, a little retention knob. My first trick, and the method I suggest to most people, is pull the spring out, turn it over. That moves the point of pressure from the front of the magazine follower to the rear of the magazine follower. Slide that back in. Careful not to lose any bits. Retain the spring, depress the indent, click it back on, grab 2 rounds. This, in a lot of cases, for a lot of rifles, is enough to get the magazine to feed reliably with that last round. And we'll just check that. So 2 shots again. And that fed nicely. And what we'll do is just do the single round, single feed test just to be sure. And yep, that fed beautifully. So that's, you know, step one, new magazine. If it doesn't feed reliably, turn that spring around and see if just having the pressure in different locations solves your problem. If it doesn't solve the problem, you have to adjust the follower. And what I recommend doing is turn the spring back around so that the spring is orientated the same as when the magazine was new. Grab the follower. I'll pull this one apart and show you the follower. Actually, no, I'll just test if it's going to have an issue or not first. Hang on. Bear with me. 2 shots. Yep. Most of these. So you can see here that I ran that one a bit hard, and I've actually bent the 22 round. Safest way I found to get rid of these is to gently slide him into the chamber. You almost always can. Bit of force, shut it, and get rid of it. And be shocked when it goes through the same hole as the one that wasn't bent. Anyway, magazine, you know, the last round in that mag popped up, caused a jam. So pull that base plate off, pull the spring out to one side. I'll turn that over in a second, but what I'll do is I'll just bring the follower out. And say for example, I turn this spring around and it still has issues. What I then suggest you do is to pull the magazine back apart, turn the spring back to the way it was when it shipped to you, and then this rear tab and that front tab, bend them further away from each other. What that'll do is create more pressure on the side of the magazine as it's trying to slide up, and it'll actually stop that rear from dropping down. It'll also mean that the pressure, this bit here won't be binding. I don't know if you can see the spring just touches the back of that follower tab. So with it around, that's the way it comes from the factory. So it means it's just going to be not touching there at the back and allow that spring to move a bit more freely. That sometimes solves the problem and you get good reliable feeding. If that doesn't solve the problem, with the adjusted follower, then pull the spring out, turn it back to reverse, and then test that with the adjusted follower. If that still doesn't work, repeat the process. Spring back around, adjust the follower even further, test, fail, turn spring around, test. If that fails, turn spring back around, widen follower. So you only widen the follower every second iteration. So yeah, look, what I'll do is first of all just do the old flip the spring around trick, that back in, let the tab go. Being very careful not to lose that little black tab. It is spring loaded. If you accidentally press it, it will go flying, and I am doing this testing outdoors, so it would be ill-advised to allow that to go walkabout. Talking and doing this is ill-advised as well. There we go. 2 shots. Pretty much the most efficient way of testing if a magazine's going to work or not. Just make sure that change in pressure isn't going to cause issues when the magazine's loaded. With a number of rounds, and it didn't, and one, and problem solved. I have had 22s where it was I think it was a 452 as well actually. Turning the spring around didn't help jack. Every single follower just needed to be slightly adjusted to work with that particular CZ, and you will experience that. I believe it's my last magazine. Yeah, just to summarise everything I've said, the very first thing I recommend you do is, if the last round pops up, is to pull the magazine apart, turn the spring 180 degrees, I don't know, is that laterally? Maybe that's actually, I don't know. But flip the spring over, reinsert so that the tab is no longer pushing at the front, like the very end of the spring is only pushing at the front, it's actually pushing at the back. That'll hold the spring a bit more level, and that'll probably solve your problems in your particular 22. If that doesn't solve the problem, pull it back apart, return the spring back to its original configuration and adjust the follower slightly. Some people go straight in and adjust the follower first. they have good results, but I find that just flipping the spring over is a faster, easier thing to do, so I generally recommend you do that first. It's more efficient, and I can say that now that I've done 30 in a single session. So, one, jam. I don't know if I've said this already, but I have actually had some that didn't need any adjustment whatsoever today, but it's been few and far between. And look, I think it's to do with just the tiny little stock. I mean, that distance, the action screws are probably in a little bit deeper, it's holding it all a little bit closer. It is a very compact little gun. I can't get over how light and small it is. I'm tempted to buy one of these and restock it for myself. Keep the stuffy little barrel and put a nice little carbon ultralight stock on it. Just it's all just so nice and compact, and I do like the open sights on it. So yeah, turn the spring around, so that's the pressure. We're going to move that pressure to the rear of the follower, reinsert. Lock that down. And you know, when you get different batches of these mags, it can be sometimes just the supplier of the spring. You know, they've got slightly stronger spring steel, and you don't want to turn that spring around, and you'll be forced to adjust the follower each time. But generally, first step, flick the spring around, give that a whirl. And last magazine. Single feed test. Beautiful. So yeah, that's my method of adjusting ISA magazines, especially when you've got a whole bag of them to do. Anyway, hopefully this helps someone.